Hello, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's session, Social Studies and Climate Literacy for a Sustainable Planet. I'm Freddie Adelman. I have the distinct honor to lead the Smithsonian Associates, the institution's program for lifelong learning. And I am delighted to introduce you to our panelists today. I'm going to keep it short and encourage you to learn more details about each of them on the website. First up are two representatives from the North American Association for Environmental Education, Executive Director Judy Brous, and Bora Simmons, who is the Director for the Guidelines for Excellence in Environmental Education project. Between them, they bring an impressive wealth of experience, commitment, and knowledge. And joining them on the panel are Dr. Jay Shuttleworth, who focuses on sustainability, controversy, and global citizenship. He's currently teaching at Queens College for the City University of New York, and Dr. Matt Holstein, who is at Kent State University researching environmental education and civic responsibility and has been involved with the National Council for the Social Studies for a decade. Dr. Larry Pasca heads up the National Council for the Social Studies, where expanding the network of social studies professionals nationwide is one of his many responsibilities. The focus of this session, once again, is how social studies learning can support stronger climate literacy education in K-12 classrooms. Protecting, understanding, and nurturing life on a sustainable planet is one of the Smithsonian's key areas of research, exhibition, and education. This work is future-focused, and student inquiry across vast disciplines, including history, geography, economics, civics, and environmental education, is more critical now than ever before. Panelists, over to you with our gratitude and appreciation.
Thank you very much, Freddie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our session. It's an honor to be with everyone here at the Smithsonian for this National Education Summit. We're proud to be back. And just very briefly, I will say that to us in social studies, environmental education, climate literacy, climate science, these are just synonymous with what we think to be what good social studies learning is all about. And so I want to take you through the partnership that is between our associations. If you go to the next slide, NAAEE and NCSS have been united as partners over the past few years through a program called EE360+. We're very proud to be considered a dissemination partner in this work that is supported by NAAEE. On the next slide, the vision of EE360 is about building an environmentally literate and engaged public in building resilient communities and working to create a healthier, more equitable, and sustainable future for all. And the mission of the work is to train a cadre of culturally diverse professionals to deliver high-quality environmental education, build the infrastructure and leadership needed to strengthen and sustain the field. So what does that mean for us in social studies? Well, again, we are a proud partner with so many other nonprofit organizations, federal agencies, other associations in support of this work. And what we bring to it at NCSS is this focus on what we see as the logical focus of environmental education as a critical example of the types of inquiry that kids do in social studies. So at NCSS, our vision is a world in which all students are educated and inspired for lifelong inquiry and informed civic action. I'm going to take you through our inquiry model in about 3 minutes. Let me see if I can do that. But many of you may be aware that we are the publishers of a framework for state and district social studies standards called the C3 framework, the College, Career, and Civic Life Framework. Whether or not you use this framework in your standards, whether or not your state has adopted or adapted them, what's underneath the framework is an inquiry model for learning. And I want to walk you through that inquiry model really quickly because the last dimension of that model is what I think, this is why we're all here today. This is why we're talking about what sustainability can look like and how we foster sustainable education in our classrooms. The first part of inquiry for us in social studies always starts with the question. How do we help our students to develop, ask, and answer questions about the world around them? So for example, I'm going to show you one example of probably my favorite inquiry question, because to me, a really good inquiry question transcends disciplines. Does where you live matter? So here's a question that might be a geography question, an economic question, a political science question, a historical question, definitely a question grounded in how do we create a sustainable planet? How do we support environmental learning across the social studies? Does where we live matter? So let's get our kids to think about how they develop questions like these and then apply specific disciplinary tools and concepts using the different social studies disciplines, using principles of acknowledged learning and environmental education, learning about geographic reasoning or economic thinking, And so, for example, in the next slide, here's what it might look like to think like a social scientist. So the questions we want our kids to be able to work with are questions like, how do unique disciplines approach the world around us? How do they ensure that their work is valid? How do they test each other's work? So if Judy, for example, has a theory about does where you live matter, and my theory may complement or not, the question is, how do we engage in dialogue together as professionals? How do we engage in dialogue as community members around how we might approach that question? So from there, our inquiry arc goes into evaluating sources and evidence. Now that we've planned a question, now that we've planned the disciplines that might address this question, we need to look at what sources of evidence can help us to answer this question. So in the next slide, we show examples of some planning that you may want to think about. What are potential sources of evidence to answer your question? What are tasks or activities that your students could complete to address these sources and work with these sources? And lastly, but certainly not least, is our final dimension, which we call communicating conclusions and taking informed action. In other words, how do our students demonstrate their answers to their inquiry questions? Are we doing 5-paragraph essays? Are we doing multiple choice tests? Are we asking students to create something? Are we asking them to plan some sort of activity that might engage them in informed action in their community? So kids can do lots of things with inquiry questions. They can understand the issue relevant to the question. They can assess their options. They can take action. There's another chart that's adapted from our partners at C3 Teachers that shows kind of the different levels of complexity. Sometimes researching an issue and writing a response is understanding the problem, and it can be done in the classroom. But sometimes taking it to the level of writing a letter to a government official, organizing a fundraising event for a specific issue, organizing a school assembly to talk about an issue is an example of applying action and might be more of a community level or higher level of activity. Again, none of these are mandated. These are just options of how we can go about communicating what we've learned with our audiences. So just as an example, if we pick the question, does where you live matter? Understanding the answer to that question might be brainstorming a list of opportunities and limitations between communities. Assessing this question might be plotting the impact that opportunities or limitations have on things like cost of living. If we're talking about sustainability in our planet, how can we foster a sense of what recreational opportunities? How would our decisions impact jobs, employment in an area, or schooling, education? Taking action might be arranging for officials to visit our classes. And among surveys we do in social studies, we learn that our students do want to engage with community officials, elected leaders. They want to get out there and talk with them about these questions that matter most to them. So that was the inquiry framework in about 3 minutes or less, I hope. It is a bit of a rush, but hopefully you'll have access to these slides. And we're always happy to work with you, with NAAEE and all partners on how we can foster the inquiry model through good social studies, through good integration of environmental education. So at this time, I just offer this as the beginning, and now I will turn it over to my colleague, Judy Brous, the Executive Director of NAAEE, to talk a little bit about environmental education in the context of inquiry and thinking through how we might foster a sustainable planet through great education.
Thank you so much, Larry, and I am super excited to be here and be part of this wonderful panel and thinking about social studies, environmental education, climate literacy, and how we can work together to create a sustainable planet. And just a big thank you to everybody that's here, to NCSS, and Larry, and the Smithsonian. The climate change emergency is for all of us to deal with and to talk through, and I'm excited to have this opportunity today to share some of the thinking going on in the field of EE, but also the intersection with social studies. And a big thank you to Larry. You are so collaborative, Larry, and we have loved working with your association and the work that you are doing in social studies to see how we can collaborate to have more impact. So in the very short time that I have today, I'm just going to talk very briefly about who NAAEE is and a little bit about our climate work. All of these slides will be available to you, so don't worry. We're going to go quickly just so we have some time at the end for questions. So we are the professional association. We like to say we're the champion of environmental education, working across North America and around the world. And we are all about advancing environmental literacy and civic engagement, using the power of education to create a more just and sustainable future for everyone. We like to also say we're a network of networks, and we are working across North America with a number of networks, as well as globally with the Global Environmental Education Partnership. So when a lot of people hear the word either environmental education or education, they think about knowledge. But of course, many of us on this webinar today know it's also skills, it's dispositions, and it's moving people to do something and become more engaged in civic life, either individually or collectively. We work across sectors and audiences with formal and non-formal educators, and we're all about lifelong learning. And we also are really looking at this intersection between environmental education and civic engagement. And if you dig into the definition of environmental ed, it's all about getting people engaged in civic life. And social studies and the work that Larry and all of you are doing is so integrated into the work that the field of environmental ed is doing. And that's why I'm so excited about this collaboration. We are also committed to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in everything we do, and thinking about how do we address systemic racism in our work as an organization and a field. And climate change is one of our strategic priorities. And we know that so many people are working on this from so many angles, but we also know it's one of the biggest threats facing humanity, and it's connected to every other issue that we are facing as a society. We also know that teaching has never been harder. It's very challenging. And I commend all of you who are teachers and what you are doing to help make the world a better place. We also know that because of all the negative news, 75% of young people are frightened by the future. That's a huge number. And if you poll adults, they're also worried. So this negativity is having impact really in all of our education work. But the positive news is there are so many people working on this issue, and especially looking at how we can do more in education. So we have a number of resources about climate change education policy. All the links are on our website. For example, we just finished a number of high-level reports to map the landscape of climate change education policy in the US, working with a bunch of great partners. We mapped the K through 12 landscape, and you can download this report. And we just posted the Mapping Higher Education Climate Policy Report, both showing we have a long way to go in terms of strengthening climate change education policy in the United States. And then we conducted a survey of K through 12 teachers and administrators to get a pulse of what they are thinking and doing. And this whole analysis is on our website. You can take a deeper dive. I'm just going to talk about high level, the state of climate change education. And we did a survey to gather baseline data, but also to lift up the importance of education in addressing climate and being able to replicate the successes that are out there. I'm not going to spend time on this, but just know that it was done really well. We worked with Edge Research, who knows exactly what they're doing, and we surveyed about 812 teachers and administrators to have a representative sample. And again, everything is on our website. You can download all of this. But just some of the high-level messages from this survey is the good news is that teachers, both administrators and teachers, are really invested in this issue. This is good news. Believe climate change is happening because of human activities, but they worry about the impact on themselves and future generations. They're also seeing concern in their students. So we know that more in high school because that's where more of the teaching is happening, in middle school. But nearly half of elementary teachers say students raise the issue of climate change in their classes. We also know that teaching climate does vary by grades. Most happens in high school and middle school, and actually most in middle school in science, not social studies, not interdisciplinary. And you see a difference here between what administrators and teachers think is actually happening. A lot more administrators think climate change education is happening than teachers say is happening. And when you ask teachers to rate climate change education, they give it overall a B or C, but when you dig in, there's really not a lot going on underneath on adaptation, on mental health, on indigenous knowledge and adaptation. There's so many things that are not covered, and that is the challenge for all of us. We also know that teaching climate change is not interdisciplinary, but teachers want to see it integrated. It's just not happening, mostly in science. And this is a slide that is really troubling, is that most teachers are not confident. They do not feel informed to teach about climate change. They're worried about it. There's political pushback. There's no support from the top. So this is something else that we need to help educators with. It's like on par with guns and mental health in terms of an issue of what they feel comfortable teaching. They also don't feel prepared to teach about the topic. They lack resources. So this is something else. We might think there's a ton out there, but a lot of teachers say they don't have what they need. So when we think about this, we know that teachers aren't feeling very prepared to teach about the most important issue we have facing humanity. So just again, the highlights, the good news, everybody's concerned about it, but we need to do more to support educators, deal with the political pushback, and really help give signals from the top that this really matters. And as fields, social studies, environmental education, science education, we need to talk about how we respond and what more we can do to help support educators who are really in the trenches doing the critical, important work. And again, so many things are happening that are super positive, including more attention to mental health and actually emphasizing some of the positive future scenarios. So the rest of our speakers are going to be taking different angles on this topic. I'm so excited by this team. And again, go to our website. You can find out all kinds of things about what I just talked about, as well as climate justice resources and other things. And I really thank you for being here and for all that you are doing to address these critical issues. And if you want anything else, contact me anytime. We are here to help you, and you'll get to hear from Bora in a minute on our team. So thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Larry to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Judy. So I hope in this introduction today, you've experienced a way of framing inquiry and thinking about how to structure curricular inquiries around environmental learning and social studies. You've learned about some of the data that both presents some troubling information, but also gives us direction for how to structure solid inquiries in learning and environmental education and social studies. Now let's hear from some of our experts. We're going to shine some positive lights on developments, research that they're working on, instructional practices that they want to foster. So first, Dr. Matthew Holstein. Dr. Holstein is an associate professor of social studies education at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. He has chaired or co-chaired our environmental sustainability and education community within the National Council for the Social Studies for the last 10 years. I stress this, that this is such important work to social studies educators that we do have, as one of our special interest communities, a very vibrant one that is focused on this topic. And through Dr. Holstein's leadership, we do programming at our annual conference, we run webinars, and we're always happy to partner with NAAEE on continuing this work. His interest in environmental issues comes from his grandparents' farm. Many of us do have farming in our family backgrounds, right? And the necessity of being a steward to the environment. I love the fact that his research focuses on the intersection between environmental education and civic responsibility, specifically how we can see environmental responsibility as civic responsibility. So Dr. Holstein, that's a perfect segue for what we're trying to foster here today. We will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Larry. And thank you to everybody for attending and for being a part of this. So what I'm going to go over is a study that I conducted with some undergraduates of mine at Kent. And I want to stress that while what we're talking about is a number of things, some of us are talking about content, some of us are talking about skills. A lot of what I'm going to present, or most of what I'll present today, is about a skill. And so this study involved two primary research questions. And these research questions, as they were structured, were really surrounding this idea of what impact is teaching students to use AEL, which is active empathic listening, and the peer method have on students' ability to engage in dialogue. And the second question being, how do students self-evaluated ability with controversial environmental issues improve after an active empathic listening and peer method intervention? Thinking about these two questions is really important. And so when we think about active empathic listening, there are a number of parts to it. I'm not going to cover a lot of it today, but we're going to kind of go over that. And so when you think about this study, there are some parts, if you want to click through so all the parts come up, the study of itself, the DNA of this study are as follows. One is that, if we can go back one slide, thank you, is that this is geared towards social studies practitioners. So thinking about classroom teachers and university instructors and faculty and how we approach the use of active empathic listening in the peer method. Also, there's an element of social justice, and I believe Judy mentioned previously that when we think about environmental issues and we think about climate change, we know the data supports the fact that a majority of the folks who are most heavily impacted by these issues are often the ones who are least able to cope based upon socioeconomic reasons, based upon race, gender, ethnicity, a number of different things. Also, this study It looks at controversial issues. A lot of what I do looks at controversial issues and how we get those in the classroom and how we talk about them and how we engage in them. Obviously, environmental education is a big part of that. And thinking about environmental education is significant because it's a lot of what I do. And as Larry said, goes back from my time on my grandparents' farm and thinking about the importance of being a steward. The last part there on the left is this idea of collaboration, and all that we do must be collaborative. When we think about teaching these issues, none of us can do this alone. None of us can do this by ourselves. And so this is exemplified by the amazing partnerships that Larry and Judy have highlighted thus far. I have to say this, it's technically, I use that word loosely, a mixed method study. I'm more of a qualitative researcher, but there are some descriptive statistics here. And this also uses the classroom as a laboratory. And the beauty of this study and the beauty of what I'm going to show you here in a moment is that this is something that a lot of us, you can take away right now and go tomorrow and put it in your classroom, unless it's summertime as it is and you don't go back until August. Next slide, please. So let me just describe for you what the peer method is. A brief sort of go back is that the peer method was developed by a colleague, Paul Summers, and I, who's a communications professor, and thinking about how we engage in active empathic listening. Active empathic listening is just that. It's active listening while also being empathetic to your speaking partner. And it takes practice, it takes effort. Paul and I were embedded with a third grade team for about a year, and we evaluated the best practices of these teachers looking through the lens of active empathic listening. And what AEL taught us and what it taught us from this research that informed what I'm presenting to you today is that we developed what's called the peer method, a simple, straightforward rubric that teachers, administrators, classroom teachers can use to evaluate the active empathic listening of their students, of their colleagues, of anyone really. And so there are 4 parts to it: proximity, elevation, eye contact, and responsiveness. Proximity being shared distance. How close are you? How far are you? The idea we must have a space that's together, it's close, it's connected. Elevation, not too high, not too low, but at a level that's equal to your speaking partner. Maintaining good eye contact. I have to make a note. This must be culturally responsive eye contact. There are those cultures that where direct eye contact can be seen as offensive. So being mindful of your students and those who you're speaking with. And lastly, responsiveness, thinking about how we respond and being responsive to our speaking partner. That's the active part, the empathetic part. This rubric, I'm happy to share it with anyone who wants to see it later. A 3-2-1 scale, 3 being the most effective and 1 being the one that needs the most work. Next slide, please. So this study, we conducted it over a 6-week period with undergraduate students. There were 12, 8 male, 4 female. And I wanted to sort of briefly identify over the 6 weeks. The first week, we just did initial data collection, looked at what students were doing, did an evaluation of their ability using the peer method rubric to see how effective they were at listening to speaking partners. As a note, it's not in the slides, but I did pair partners with those who were pro-environmental issues and those who were anti or showed little interest in or did not have an interest in the environmental issues, so as to create some sort of strain between the two speaking partners to see how that would move forward. After that, there was between weeks 2 and 5. Each week was spent on each of the 4 parts of the peer method. 1 week on proximity, 1 week on elevation, 1 week on eye contact, and 1 week on responsiveness, so as to focus on each of these to teach them as a skill. Now, as a really important point to note here is when you're teaching this for the first time, just like anything, as we think, many of us do, we don't want our students and the folks who are teaching this to be thinking about this peer method the entire time. We have to be mindful that as you do this, the more effective you are at it, the better you get at it, the easier it becomes. So the results, first and foremost, was that we found a focus on listening. When you teach students to focus on listening, that's what they do. They talk less, they listen more, which is important. Next point, please. 84%, I know it's a small sample size, but they viewed controversial environmental issues as less controversial, which is important because while none of us we don't view environmental issues as controversial, there are a lot of folks who still do. Next part. And a majority of the folks, a significant majority, view them as less controversial when they were using the peer method and dialoguing with their colleagues. So when you engage those two and you put them together, Now we have a significant reduction in their view of these issues. Next, please. There was a 75 to 200% increase in message retention. This is really important. This is applicable beyond just what we're doing here, because we did initial inventory with scripted text to figure out how much did how much did the respondents remember or recall what was said to them after we initiated the peer method training. We had a 75 to 200% increase. So what this means is folks are listening, they're paying attention. And when you listen and pay attention, good things happen. Next part. We also have self-reported increased empathetic behavior. So being more empathetic towards your colleagues, towards each other. Next, please. And then also a significant increase in student willingness to listen to their colleagues with whom they disagree. That's important, right? So we're talking about controversial issues and controversial environmental issues. If we want folks to engage in these issues and have conversations and further the message, they have to be willing to listen and dialogue with somebody they disagree with. And that's what this method does. Next, please. And so when we think about this, when you think about these issues in general, what this showcases for us, what it showcases is that the peer method as a method is incredibly effective. And in doing so, there are some implications here. One is that listening fosters understanding. When you listen to somebody and you pay attention to somebody, you have a deeper understanding of who they are, their message, why they think what they think. Also, the peer method creates a structured and intentional approach for how we can teach about controversial environmental issues and how we engage in dialogue. This peer method can also, it can alter the climate and culture of the classroom. And that's noted by the fact that when interviews with students, a number of the students indicated they felt more welcome. The classroom was more welcoming and was more inclusive after this training because they listened. That's so powerful, especially in the work we're trying to do to get folks to listen. And lastly, I know as teachers and educators, we're always thinking about measurable growth. The peer method allows for measurable growth in listening with a specific foci. So when we think about how we teach someone this, with this rubric, we have a specific place to measure and where can we find growth? How can we improve? It was a wonderful study, and I really appreciate you listening. I try to be as brief as possible. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Judy. Thank you so much.
Matt, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And really, the emphasis on the peer method and listening is so important to the work we do. And we have to talk to people who don't agree with us or might see things differently. Now I am honored to turn this over to Bora Simmons. She is a wonderful colleague. She oversees the NAA's Guidelines for Excellence, and she has been actively involved in environmental education, research, evaluation, and professional development for more than 4 decades. And she is one of the most talented and thoughtful colleagues I have had the pleasure of working with. So, Bora, take it away.
Thank you. Next slide, please. We'll move it on. So, as we all know, climate change is tricky. It's a huge issue. It's complex. It's changing. It is politically controversial at every level. And there's a general frustration that we can't do everything all at once. It can feel overwhelming. After all, we're asking individuals to make informed decisions and act upon them. Next. The roadmap to informed climate action is not intuitive, nor is it easy. We know that education in and outside of school has a huge role to play, but what works? NAE, along with our colleagues at the University of Florida and Stanford University, conducted a series of systemic reviews of peer-reviewed research related to the effectiveness of K-12 EE, how to make climate change education more impactful, the civic engagement outcomes of environmental education, and the impacts of EE on conservation outcomes. Across these studies, we found that effective EE that promotes civic engagement focuses on the local community and actively engages people through hands-on experiential learning. Next slide. It also uses deliberative discussions to surface differences in what people value and to examine trade-offs. It emphasizes the development of lifelong skills such as critical thinking and problem solving and systems thinking, and importantly, decision-making skills. And for climate change, it addresses the misconceptions, particularly around the science behind climate change. They also found in this study that EE that promotes civic engagement and action includes action taking as an integral part of the education program. Students are applying what they have learned while participating in action taking. They're going beyond learning about climate change and about action. And finally, effective programs provide ongoing opportunities for students to engage in meaningful social interactions while they're learning. Next slide, please. So what does this look like? The good news is that we have an ever-developing toolbox of instructional approaches and learning frameworks that help us guide this practice, as well as our guidelines for excellence. Next slide. So for instructional approaches, we have well-established learner-centered and learner-driven approaches, including place-based education and problem-based learning. Action civics is one of them. Next, please. As an example, our colleagues at EarthForce have refined a 6-step environmental action civics process that starts with the students diving into the community, identifying issues that they care about, and they conduct research. They develop action strategies, and then they take action, and then they reflect on their actions. Next slide, please. So we have instructional strategies. We also have learning frameworks, are another set of tools in that toolbox. With the Kettering Foundation, we've been looking at the development of a learning framework that marries civic engagement and environmental action. This framework is built from a synthesis of NAAE's K-12 EE guidelines, as well as C3 and Guardian of Democracy. Next slide. This learning framework focuses on the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that prepare individuals to, next slide, engage in democratic processes and participate in community-level policy responses. Next. Among other things, in order to do that work, learners need to develop an understanding of who makes decisions, what influences the decision-making process. Basically, they need to be able to map who holds the power. They also need to be able to understand the principles of justice, including environmental justice. They need to develop skills to apply systems thinking, work collaboratively, develop action plans, and importantly, they need to be able to evaluate the intended and unintended consequences of their own civic actions. Next. They need to be able to identify shared values and principles and develop the self-efficacy and personal agency to act individually and collectively, hoping to be able to bring about change. Next slide, please. So in addition to instructional approaches and developing learning frameworks, NAAE has the National Project for Excellence in Environmental Education that provides another set of tools. We developed a series of publications that are setting the standards for high-quality environmental education practices. We have guidelines for K-12 learner outcomes and early childhood EE programs and how to work with communities as an educator. These publications were developed using a highly participatory process involving thousands of individuals and organizations. And we like to think about them as being able to sort of capture our collective wisdom about best practices. Next slide, please. And now we're developing a new set of guidelines that are focused on empowered climate action. Next slide. As part of our process, we've gathered input from hundreds of individuals and organizations. And I invite you to get in touch with me after this presentation if you'd like to be involved with this process. But what those hundreds of people have told us up to this point is that successful education for climate action centers on climate justice. It requires systems thinking, is driven by community interests and encourages civic engagement and action. It also must build hope and address climate action and climate grief, or we're not going to get anywhere. And we have to address misinformation and myths. And of course, we need to use highly effective teaching methods, all those great instructional strategies. But even with all of these tools in our toolbox, we face challenges. Next slide. Because informed climate action is our goal, these education practices take time, a tremendous amount of time. How do you reconcile this investment of time with the urgent need for action and change? That's something we grapple with all the time. We also need to be clear in our education, in our instruction, about our civic engagement goals. Are personal responsibility and individual actions enough? Is participation in community groups enough? Do we need to move towards a justice-oriented engagement? How do we better help people participate in collective action and community-level policy responses? Next. And a final challenge, we must find a balance within our roles as educators. As educators, we hold a tremendous amount of power over the process. The challenge is to give up some of that power and the temptation to push and prod people into predefined solutions and actions, and focus on helping people develop those knowledge, skills, and dispositions for empowered climate action. Thank you. Last slide. Yay. I'll turn it back over to Larry.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. Thank you so much for your presentation. We are now going to focus a little bit on how we do approach teaching climate change in the social studies classroom. I'm pleased to invite Dr. Jay Shuttleworth as our next presenter. He teaches social studies methodology and research courses at the City University of New York, Queens College. His research focuses on sustainable living, difficult knowledge, global citizenship education, controversial issues, and pre-service education. So much of what we just learned, and let's put into practice in the classroom. He previously taught high school history in Northern California and currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. Dr. Shuttleworth.
Great, Larry. Thank you for the introduction. What we're going to do is we're just going to have a quick snapshot about research that I've been doing in the social studies classroom over the last 10 years. And what I'd like to do is to just focus on 3 main points for some practical engagement. So we'll stay here on this slide. 3 things that we're going to talk about: embedding the themes of sustainable living within the course, not the unit of instruction. And we'll get to that. Second, let students practice identifying what's worth sustaining to them. If we're going to be talking about developing empathy for people that they may not know, we need to first of all practice empathy to things that are immediate within our own lives. And then third, how do we identify issues that are valid for inquiry? Just because it's a question doesn't mean it's necessarily something that is legitimate to discuss. Let's go to the next slide. All right, embedding themes within the course. So my experience has been, if we don't embed themes of sustainable living within the course itself, when we do talk about sustainable living, the students might say, is this really part of the class? Or is this environmental day? Or I'm not really sure that this is important. And so I think the key here is to make sure within the first week of the course to define how you want to include sustainable living within the overall fabric. And let's go to the next slide just to give everybody, again, how I'm understanding sustainable living. This is Victor Nolet's idea from Western Washington. The idea about sustainable living is it's not simply future-oriented. You'll notice it says the current generation meets its needs while not affecting future generations to meet their needs. So the idea is our needs in the present are still very much a part of this conversation. Let's go to the next one. What I've noticed teachers do, though, when they embed sustainable living or just sustainability within the overall themes of the course, they often ask it in sometimes a non-environmentally specific way so that it can apply as a matter of logic, not necessarily of sound ecology. So could you live this way for a really long time? If yes, why? And if no, what would you need to do differently? And I think that that kind of conversation really gets a lot of traction because of its logic orientation. Let's go to the next slide. This is just an example from a classroom where a teacher used the word stewardship to guide the overall core values of the course, so that when it showed up within the daily lessons, the students are like, yeah, we already know this. But the idea here is it should not be something that's a surprise to the students. It should already be a fabric within the course. Next slide, please. And this one, again, was valuable because sustainability for this particular teacher was part of a year-long essential question. And so this was introduced within the first week of the course, and not every day was about sustainable living. But when it did come up, the students were informed, they understood it, and it was, for them, part of the course, not something that had just been dropped in. Let's go to the next one. Again, what I've noticed so much in the classroom is empathy is critical for getting students to think about climate change. But if we don't let them practice empathy in a way that's meaningful for them, it's very hard to open up that concentric circle beyond their own lives. And let's just go to the next slide. This is a snapshot from a classroom that I went to. This is a student's work where the teacher asked them at the beginning of the course, what do I want to sustain? And, granted, there were a lot more complexities with the assignment, but before we even talked about the content, the students were tasked, what is important to you in a broad sense? And then when the students learned what was important to each other, this was a way to not only articulate what was important personally, but to understand that other people might have similar and divergent needs within this dimension. Next one. And the final one. We've talked about inquiry. I think it's important that we understand how we develop social issues that are valid. And again, I just want to go to the next slide to let you know how I'm understanding a social issue. A question in which well-informed individuals may disagree. And that's, of course, the great Anna Ochoa Becker. But the key here is well-informed individuals. We're not just going to have a speed round where we're going to fire questions at each other. This is something that we've been building up to for a long time. Let's go to the next slide. Here are two snapshots from classes that I've been in where teachers have posed questions that use sustainable living around climate change or sustainable living in general. Now, what I liked about the global citizenship, the global and world history course, what makes a civilization sustainable, is that when we're looking at that ancient civilizations unit, there are easy on-ramps to talk about climate change in the present. And I think a lot of times people say, well, how could I possibly make ancient culture about something today? Well, civilizations are timeless as far as the things that allow them to be sustained or not. Let's go to the next slide. I want to talk very briefly about how teachers should be really self-examining their inquiry-oriented questions. So in a global history class, on a unit about climate change refugees, one teacher led the unit by asking, do larger, more powerful countries have a responsibility to help small countries adapt to climate change? And the problem the teacher noticed after this unit was over is that the students didn't all agree. But the teacher said, well, wait a second, the global community has established that more powerful countries do have some sort of responsibility. And this has been established at these global conferences where countries pledge money, maybe not enough, but they do acknowledge that that responsibility is there. So the teacher said, okay, I need to rework this. Let's go to the next slide. And when the teacher did this during the summer school, opened up the inquiry questions to what he felt were much more open and discussable questions. What's the best way to control climate change? How to help climate change refugees? Who's more responsible, individuals or governments? And to my final slide. I think the best way to approach this is who is responsible for addressing this issue, if anybody, and what is the best way to solve the issue, if at all? Again, talking about responsibility and action taking. All right, I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I think in our concluding moments, first of all, thank you to each of our panelists. I hope those of you who are attending and viewing today that this is not only just food for thought, but helps you to think about how we structure inquiry, what the latest research is, and how we're trying to apply it, and then how we really are looking to broker the relationship between environmental learning and social studies. And so I do want to close with kind of a thought. If each speaker, maybe for 30 seconds, could just take a quick look at thought to this question, which is, how would you articulate the intersection of environmental education and social studies through climate science and understanding climate change and sustainability? Yikes, that's a heavy mouthful, but how would you kind of in one sentence articulate kind of the urgency of what you see before us here through this session? And I guess I'll start with you, Dr. Holstein.
I think that if we don't act now, time is out. I hate to be hyperbolic or to sound hyperbolic, but really that's what it comes down to. If we don't do something now and do it in a way that is integrative across all parts of society, we're running out of time quickly.
Dr. Simmons.
Yeah, I think I would sum it up by saying that, the science is pretty clear. We know an awful lot about climate change and what's happening and why it's happening and the human causes of climate change. And so the real question then becomes, what do we do about it? What should we do? And that's where social studies, that's where environmental education comes in. It's the policy, it's the individual actions, it's what we do individually and collectively.
Outstanding. Dr. Shuttleworth.
Agreed. Scientists aren't debating whether climate change is a problem. Therefore, we shouldn't have students be debating that. They should debate, what kind of world do we want to live in?
Outstanding. Judy, we've been working really hard today at this intersection between environmental learning, social studies, solving problems. Although we have a lot of problems to solve, we also have been focused on solutions through research, through inquiry structuring, through asking and answering really good questions using sources. Thoughts on your perspective, from your perspective, especially on how we move forward. Oh, and you're on mute.
There couldn't be a more important time to actually be thinking about this, as everybody has said, but the world is going to change and we need to help our students figure out what their role is, empower them to be engaged citizens and not despair, but have hope that we can create a green future. And it's by environmental ed, civic engagement, social studies, we've got to collectively work together to address these issues. So really excited about what everybody has said. And Larry, why don't you close us out?
Well, first of all, we want to thank all of you for participating. This really needed to be a full day summit. Maybe we'll work with the Smithsonian on that together in the future. But in the meantime, we do want to thank each of you, our panelists, for sharing your insights and thoughts today. Judy Browse and the team at NAAEE, thank you for a great partnership. NCSS is committed to continuing working with you. And to our partners at the Smithsonian, thank you again for inviting us in. This is an important conversation to all of us. We're happy to continue working with you to foster great critical thinking, learning, inquiry around this important topic. And we certainly wish you the best with the rest of the summit today. But unfortunately, we don't have time for questions right now, but we would, both our associations, love to follow up with you. Please know your associations are here together to work for you, to support you, to better your practice in classrooms, to support your research. That's what we exist to do. And through our partnership with the Smithsonian, we hope to keep doing that for many more years to come. So thank you all so very much today.